Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. I have Martin Kimmel with me. He is a senior living architect, and we are going to talk about design and humanity and getting things right or at least better and where senior living architecture and design needs to go. We're going to touch a little bit on technology since it's a technology show. But before we get started, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Martin, welcome to Tech Tuesday. I love having on our live streams people who are changing the world for older people in the context of senior living. So I want to start with just talking about who you are, what you do, what your passion is for changing this world of senior living.
Great. Well, Steve, thanks so much for having me. It's a delight to be on your show. And I first got connected into senior living through working with some relatives and seeing where they were living, and it was kind of depressing to me. And I had a fledgling architecture firm at the time, and I was like, why not go into this and see if we couldn't bring a little more dignity to the kind of spatial experiences that they were at that time being forced to live in by circumstance. And now, of course, the world's changed in the 25 years since I started into the senior world.
Terrific. And so you have written fairly recently that the senior living industry has been designing buildings based on a troubling assumption. What is that assumption, and why is it hurting operators?
Well, I have observed both sides of the coin here. And one is the traditional form of senior living planning, which is to dumb down buildings, that older people are conservative, that they want like traditional things that they saw, 40, 50 years ago. And versus those that have treated their senior living residents or their customers or their families as thoughtful, creative, well-traveled, sophisticated people. And to me, the mark between the two is as clear as day as it could be, is everyone will choose the best, most invigorating environment that they have available to them if they're given a choice. And that to kind of rely on old standards is just to keep the whole industry trapped in the past.
So can you give me some examples of the kinds of things that people are doing that they need to stop doing, and maybe what those alternatives might be?
Yeah, so I would say, if you're watching this, next time you're driving around and you see a sign that's a senior living community, just kind of look at it critically for a second and go, does that look like something I might have seen in the 70s or the 80s? Is it got little shutters and little double hung windows and maybe a little brick and some curtains, and it just looks like a dated architecture and a space that you don't have any interest in hanging a right into unless you had to go there. So look at those. And then if you see any that you go, wow, that almost looks like a resort. That is bright. It has big windows. It's lit up in the evening. It looks invigorating. It looks like a place that maybe I would want to hang a right into. Those are the kind of things that is where it starts. And when you look at it from an industry sales perspective, and you're trying to attract residents and their families, I mean, that is where it all starts, is way out on the road and the first thing you see from there.
So this is really interesting to me. I think about, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago where they had a keynote speaker by somebody from the Disney Institute, and it was a leadership thing, but as he showed a bunch of pictures. And one of the things that I think about with Disney is they make even driving up to and into the park an experience. And when I think about, I drive by a number of senior living communities every day. In my community, we have a lot of communities near my house and on some of the routes I travel. And I'm always impressed by how understated they are. boring. Is boring. I don't know whether boring is too strong a word, but maybe boring. And how do we make them bigger and bolder? And I think people are afraid of offending. And so how do you make that balance?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that fear of being too dynamic is it's like the false model. Again, it's like, I'm going to be conservative because I think the resident is a conservative person. In today's, baby boom generation that's coming online, I mean, they've traveled the world. They're more educated. They're wealthier. They're more traveled than any seniors in history. And even those seniors that aren't super well heeled, that come from a pretty basic financial background, they've seen the world through movies and TVs and some travel, and they're aspirational. They've been aspirational, and they don't want their latter years to be dumbed down. So we talk about, we use the word choreograph to choreograph the first experience someone's going to have. And we go, if I'm going to plug that in, where am I coming from? Which direction am I likely to arrive? What am I going to see offsite before I get there? And then what am I going to see first? Like you mentioned, the Disney model is, what is the first thing you see, and what kind of experience, what visceral experience is going to hit you in the chest? And again, is it something I want to keep going that way? Or is it something that, to use your words, that it's kind of boring and same old? And boring and same old is not a good business model if you want to beat your competition in any business.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm thinking that when I was a kid and I would go to Disneyland, I think the first time I was 12 or 13, and I lived in Northern California, and I wanted to go so bad. And you're driving down the 5, and pretty soon you look up, and off to the right hand side, you see the top of the Matterhorn, and you're almost there, and you're so excited. And and then I wonder if you can, can you create that kind of excitement where this place, as I drive up into a senior living community, I go, man, this looks really cool.
Yeah.
So,
how we tackle that, as I said, first of all, is to choreograph it and think about what the first experience, how it's going to be to walk up to the front door. I sort of joke, you can only shake somebody's hand the first time. So when you're inviting someone in to your community, what they see that first time is the only chance you get to kind of hit them over the head and attract them and say, no, I'm different. I'm a place where your mother-in-law is going to be for a few years. So we look at it as to create a beacon that attracts people. So at our front doors, a lot of facilities, they're kind of saddled with a big covered carport type of entrance, because you want to be able to get people in and out. And so we usually try to take a major community space and put it on the second, third, and fourth floors above that, and have it have a huge amount of glass, so that when it's lit, in the winter, you think about the winter, whether it's a cold climate or a warm climate, it gets dark early. And this thing is radiating light and looks like something is going on, and it's attractive. And you think like a bug to a light, if you will. We want to attract people to the, it's a dynamic place to live, and it's not a boring kind of sad place to go.
Well, it's almost like your own Matterhorn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love this so much. The other thing you've talked about is what it's like for people to tour communities, and people walk through these communities, and they tell us the things they tell us, but they probably are things that they're not likely to tell us, but they're things that are thinking. And you spend a lot of time sort of working on that and thinking about it. Can you expand on that?
Well, the color, the quality of light, the quality of the air, all strike people. You get multiple sensory experiences when you walk in a facility. Our residents just hanging out by the door because they have nothing to do. Like that's like a big red flag, right? So having the right kind of furniture, and one of our keys, so we have our beacon that I already mentioned that you see from the outside, but when you come on the inside, it's almost always a volume. It's not like a low lobby space. It's a 1.5 or 2 or 2.5 story kind of space that feels airy and not crushing, and has stuff going on. Like you can see, you have basically view corridors to a main street. A lot of times we'll put like the various amenities that are not part of a private residential experience, and really sort of populate the main street with all the cool attractions. and that you can see them, not everything from the front door, but you get a view that there's more. There's more right there. And even in a world where we have more security now and you want to slow people down when they come through the door the first time, you still want to have a sense of, I want to walk around that corner, or I want to go past that fountain, and really have something that just draws you in and says anything but senior. And again, I think of folks that have traveled the world. They've gone to some really interesting resorts in the US or abroad, and go, what makes a resort really attractive when you walk in? And we just basically kind of follow that model. And the whole idea is it's more about hospitality vacation than it is about the old school residential model of warehousing our oldest, most important citizens.
Oh man, you got my head so spinning right now. I'm thinking about things like if you go to Bass Pro, they've got this big waterfall with the tanks of fish. Wouldn't it be amazing to have something like that? Or I used to sell technology in Silicon Valley, and I remember walking into a technology company that did video games, and they had this big, I don't know, 40, 50 feet projection of these video games, including the sound and everything going in the front lobby. I think it must have been terrible for the people who were managing the front lobby. And you wouldn't want to quite probably have something that jarring. But what if you had this big video projection of seniors doing amazing? I don't know. It would be really cool.
Actually, that's a great idea. I might steal that one from you. We haven't done anything quite like that, but if I do, that'll be the Moran effect. We'll call it. But it is interesting to have that, and we do. What that made me think of is, you said that one of the things that we try to do is, a lot of these facilities can tend to get very big, and that leads to long corridors, long residential corridors. And this is a problem that hotels have too, where you can just feel like you're walking down this aimless corridor forever and ever. And so we really make a point to have lots of intersections, like shorter wings, more intersections. And then at the intersection of two crossing corridors, to have a common area, a gathering place. Usually it'll go up and maybe go up to all the way to the roof, and it'll be skylit in the middle. And you never have this sense of, I'm just, sort of a soul crushing corridor. And particularly for people that maybe are less ambulatory, that sense of the drudgery of the walk to get to the heart of activity can keep people in their rooms. And you really want them out in the community. And one of the reasons they're called retirement communities is the idea is to have community again, because it gets you out of isolation, which is a real serious risk for seniors. Is the more isolated and alone you are, and friends have moved away to live with their kids, or worse yet, they passed away, you can become very isolated. And so the idea is to once you move into a community, is to become part of it.
Yeah, I really like this. I mean, you could create, almost a sub. You could take a part of a building and create a neighborhood. You put some game tables, maybe you put coffee and refreshments there. It takes a little bit of money to do that, but you actually make it easier to make connections than walking into a dining room where there are, or dining room where there are 200 people or 100 people, or even an activity where there are 40, 50 people. So one of the things that scares me about all my conversation here with you so far is it all sounds too expensive to do. So you have this, let me get it right, extraordinary solutions for ordinary budgets. How do you make this all work in a budget?
Okay, and funny enough, that's right here on my coffee mug. So I think about that every day. That is our mission, and our mission is to help people do really great things with design with real world amounts of dollars. And so the key to us to succeed are two things. One, if you're an architect, you typically spend most of your creative energy on the aesthetics of how something looks and on the layout, like the organizational layout of a floor plan, so that it can operate the way you want it. And, while those are hugely important things that we do, in the amount of things that we touch, from site planning and parking and stormwater to foundation design to structural frames to kitchens and dining rooms and everything you can think of, it probably only represents about 15% of what we do. And so our approach is to apply creativity to that other 85% as well. And it's to use creativity to design waste out. So what we want to do is define with our owners, our community, what makes it tick and what is highest value to you to attract and retain residents, to have a quality of life that you want to give, to have a financial performer, whether it's a not-for-profit or a for-profit, that will make it, continue to be viable and relevant, and then design waste out and effectively push money from places of little value, like say out in the parking lot. You put pipes underground and you have inlets everywhere. That costs a lot of money, and that's literally money in the dirt. And no one ever sees it or really appreciates it. So how can we be more efficient on the site? And so if you imagine like squeezing a bunch of little rags, eventually you have a whole bucket of water. Well, that's what we try to do, is take a little bit of every part of the project, squeeze waste out, push it to higher value. So that's definitely the primary way we achieve an extraordinary solution for an ordinary budget.
I do want to talk a little bit about technology, but before we get there, I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of waste and wasted space. You've obviously walked a lot of buildings. When you walk through senior living communities and you talk to owners, operators, what are the places where they walk through and say, man, I wish I hadn't done that?
So I think one of the main things is when you dedicate large amounts of square footage to very limited specific purpose uses, it makes buildings bigger and more expensive, and you might only use that space a certain number of hours a day. So think about your house. I mean, I think almost everybody lives this way. You live probably mostly in 1 or 2 rooms. If you have the right kind of kitchen great room, that's where you're spending 90% of your waking hours. And if you have a formal dining room, you probably almost never use it, a couple times a year. If you have a big foyer front door, you probably hardly open the front door, but a few times a year because you come in through, the side door, the back door, the garage. It's a little bit like that. Why have the big formal foyer? Why have the big, formal dining room when that's really not where people want to be? And so what we're trying to do is pivot to the way people live out in the outside world. Like you want to go to like cool bar restaurants. Like there's, people are still putting these white tablecloth dining experiences, and the seniors don't want to be there either, any more than the rest of us do. You're going to go to Ruth's Chris, once or twice a year, but that's not where you want to be every night. It's like a little bit too much. So we're trying to make these great pub dining casual experiences that also in the non-meal times are a place where you're hanging out or you're playing games or, there's a music event. And so again, having a fewer, better, I'll call great room experiences, more so than individual, there's the movie theater room that's just dedicated and we're going to see movies, 2 nights a week and the rest of the time it sits empty. Things like that. And then, it's just sort of taking lessons from life. There's no rocket science to any of this. It's just thinking about how people really want to live in a more casual, upscale, dignified, bright, airy types of spaces.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And sort of by the same token, as you walk through buildings, what do you hear people say? Boy, I wish I had put in more of fill in the blank.
Okay, so to do that, I'm going to circle back in. And you said I could do this, which is I want to talk a little bit more about the extraordinary solutions ordinary budget thing, because I had 2 points on that. The first one I already gave, but the second one is that good design that's planned into a project from the start costs zero. It's not about the money. If you just make something nice by decorating it, like adding more, frilly stuff or more trim or crown mold or things like that, that it's expensive. It doesn't really add that much value, but it definitely costs money. So that's where we use volumetric spaces. We really believe in a lot of daylighting. And, I have a whole seminar on how, the old conventional wisdom that windows cost more than walls, so you want to limit the number of windows is hogwash. It's actually windows these days are equal to or less expensive than walls. So let's go big on glass. Big on glass, daylighting creates the environment, and it's very inexpensive, and simple, inexpensive communities can afford it, and bigger communities can afford it because it's kind of a cost neutral kind of endeavor anyway.
I love that. Look, I want to talk a little bit about this is a tech show. I want to talk a little bit about technology. 25 years ago, the only technology that was put into most buildings was cable TV and phones. Oh,
Yep.
and a very basic call system. That's all changed. Now we've got streaming, we've got internet, we've got TVs with amazing quality in people's rooms. How do you think about technology as you design and where that all fits in?
One of the big challenges for people that design buildings is how the building can adapt to the technology that changes way faster than the building does. Like the building gets built. So, I mean, one of the things you do is you try to make it as flexible as possible from a wiring and wireless perspective, which is, not super sexy tech, in the way that you probably wish it would be. So many people now are really, it's all phone enabled, it's iPad enabled interfaces that people can interface with each other. I mean, we've had there's like a Wii bowling craze for seniors where there's bowling teams and it's all like still the Wii, where it's simulated bowling and there's tournaments and they're piping that through and people can watch. It's kind of, I walk by and I'm like, who knew? It'd be like colleges now. You have the, gaming teams that are the video game teams. I'm like, who knew you could get a scholarship for that? But here we go. So we do see it certainly on the safety and security side. I mean, there's more and more that if someone has a problem, it's easier for them to call for help or to have the auto call for help, which is really a great thing. And those components get smaller and smaller as we go. The one thing that I'd say we use most often in memory care facilities and to a certain extent in general population facilities is integrated circadian rhythm lighting. So if you wonder what that means, that is basically tuning the light throughout the day and into the night to match the natural light cycles that our bodies respond to that give us triggers for sleep. It's particularly helpful in memory care because people can become, if you ever heard of sundowning, can become agitated. So if we can tune the light so that the day progresses naturally, it can help keep them in rhythm when their normal sleep habits have deteriorated. And we do have quite a bit, especially in memory care, which, I hate that we need it, but I like to be part of making it as good as it can be to help folks stay as present and have a better quality of life longer, even when they're in a deteriorating condition that has no way out.
So I didn't sort of plan on talking about this until you brought it up, but I actually think this is worth a conversation. I've got my stepfather's has got dementia. He's in a six bed residential home, so they're not dementia specific, but this house has sort of turned into the dementia place. Of a number of people there and locked fence, but not really locked door, and hadn't been a problem. But when I go into big memory care communities, I'm always sort of struck by the what feels like it's how do I'm trying to figure out how to do this in a politically correct plate, but it's almost like it's an afterthought.
Yep.
That it's just not, it's built because you have to have it, but it's not as good, almost as if, well, those people aren't really important, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't feel like it's as good. I don't know what better would be, but I know it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel very welcoming and home.
Well, I can tell you some things about better, and that we in how we have had a bit of a specializing in this. And this was working with care providers that care, like they wanted to be better. And so you start teaming and you start talking about what physically helps people stay more present for longer. And, those connections. And what, if you have, as you said, your father-in-law with dementia, he probably recalls things from his long distance past better than he does from 10 minutes ago. That's usually the pattern of that. And so we look at what are the cues that they will still be able to respond to. So for instance, like we have all the activities of daily living, so to speak, happen and in plain sight. So laundry is done on the unit. And the smell of a dryer, you know that smell when there's a dryer door opening, and when somebody's folding freshly dried laundry. Well, the people that work there are folding the sheets right there in the middle, and people can come and participate, and they remember that, and that's a cue. You mentioned the word neighborhoods earlier. If folks can have some sense of ownership of where their room is and how it's personalized for them, they're more likely to be able to find their own door, even if it's trouble. A lot of folks will, these kind of things, like you said, what looks different? What looks different is when you walk into something that's set up to really care for those people in the place that they are, versus it's just rooms in a corridor, and people are kind of all congregated in one area looking pretty not happy with life. You can tell the difference. So perhaps your father-in-law walks a lot, because a lot of times the population in a memory care unit are younger, significantly younger than the population in the rest of the facility. And so that means they're often more ambulatory. In other words, they're kind of a little bit more fit, if you can imagine. And they walk a lot. And if you have corridors that dead end, they cannot understand how to turn around. And so we do all of our memory care facilities where there are no dead end corridors. So basically, resident rooms are around the perimeter. All of the activities are in the middle and open to view. And if you walk on the corridor, you could just sort of walk to infinity and never hit that agitating moment. Even when you go out to a garden, there'll be a big loop through the garden that always brings you back to a loop, or to the door that you came out of, and you don't end up like down in the corner, like confused. So it's like 1,000 little things add up to a much better experience.
I love what you're saying about memory care. I just think it's an area, and honestly, it may not make, as I think about it, it may not make that much difference to the residents because they are impaired. But I think the way it presents to families and decision makers is really, really significant. And you do want to make that difference. Actually, I do have one more question about it first before I move on.
Sure.
I can remember a period where smell was a really big thing. People would be baking cookies, or they'd use these scent machines. That's all disappeared. Why is that?
Actually, I mean, from our perspective, when I was talking about the activities of daily living, that does include having, even like, food is not trade to you. Food is brought onto the unit and then served like family style, and you can smell it. People can help. They can help clean up dishes. The anticipatory smell of it being there before it like just goes directly to a tray, all those are still to some extent very important. But again, they're around memory cues of the past as opposed to more of a specific therapeutic, if that makes sense. And I'm not a therapeutic expert, but I've worked with some pretty good ones.
Right. No, I like that a lot. One thing that I don't really hear people talking about very much, but I actually think is really important is how do you make spaces work for team members? And there may be other aspects, but the two that seem important for me is, one, just work patterns in terms of how many times they have to walk back and forth or around in circle. But then the other is sort of the aesthetic part of it, where it just feels good to work in this particular building.
So, I mean, you bring a great point, because in the sort of great irony of how in this country, sometimes the people doing the hardest, most important work are often the lowest paid. I think of EMT workers. I think of specifically people caring for the elderly are doing this important work, but it's generally on a low pay scale. So it's either a job of desperation or it's a job of such passion that you're willing to kind of take less than you might doing something else because you want to care for these people. So interestingly enough, all of the things that make it a nice community for folks to consider to bring their relative, which, we've talked about, from the daylighting to the front door experience, also create a better work environment because they're literally working in the facility. Everything about daylighting, circadian rhythm, color, volume, there's a sense of wellness to that. And the wellness is like a key piece. Like you don't feel miserable. The circadian lighting has the same effect on all people. It doesn't matter how old or young you are. So those things are great. The back of the house, though, those offices or where those locker spaces are. Like they can be down in a dingy basement and an afterthought of a break room, or they can be part of the same decor. They can be part of the same experience, that when you're off duty and taking a break, you're not in a hole. You're in a beautiful place with a window too. And again, doesn't cost money. The last point I had on the how you extraordinary solution something is design it into the DNA. The good design is just part of it. It's not ever added on. And keeping workers is tough. And if you can do everything you can to make it a great place to be, that is clean, that doesn't have weird odors, et cetera, et cetera. Those are great things. We do work to some extent in the memory care, where you have a lot of hands-on about having, like I said, everything happens in the middle. So you're not always running back to a nurse's station. You're not always running. It's all kind of right there. There's a little of that I think helps. I mentioned earlier, shorter corridors with nice intersections. It's a shorter distance to run and check on Mrs. So-and-so. All of those things I think are kind of true. We've seen operationally people allow their resident workers to dress more casually and not in like really sort of medical looking uniforms. Everybody seems to like that. I mean, you have a dress code, you have your ID, but you don't have to be, wearing scrubs and nursing shoes, everywhere you go.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. So our operator is either getting ready to do a new build or a major refurbishment. And they know that whatever they end up with, they're going to have to live with for 20 or 30 years, or spend a ton of money fixing it. What are the things that they should be on the lookout for, warning signs that they should be looking for if they were working? Obviously, it wouldn't happen with you, right? So with other architects, that they should be sort of, what would be warning signs? What would be things they should look for to protect themselves?
Well, you're talking about planning who you're going to hire. If you're going back there, sort of, have that conversation that it's not just about money, and it's not just about high design, because sometimes you get someone that's going to over design it, you can't afford it, and then you have to cut it all out anyway, and then you don't get it, and you've wasted the money. What are their sensibilities? What are their experiences? We talk to our clients about, what is the mission? What are you trying to accomplish with this project, of which, being financially viable is just one. And then we try to push toward mission. I'd look at their work. I would talk to the people they work for, but better still, go into the facilities. And again, the designer doesn't control everything. A poorly operated, nice facility is still a poorly operated facility, and it's not going to probably be all that nice. So those are some critical things. But if you're looking at a renovation, we do assessments. Like, I only have so much money to make this better. And we'll go in and we call them surgical strikes. What are the few spaces that you could touch right away that would really make a difference? So it starts at the front door, is always number one. What's that experience like? Number two is, what is the culinary experience? And we haven't talked that much about the food, but people, their whole lives, food is the center of life. And the better the culinary experience that you give for the people that work there, going back to that, like, it's a nice serving experience. The kitchens are nice. They're ventilated right. They're cool. The chef is like challenged to have a great, interesting menu and not just worried about, trying to cut the cost per meal down. Makes that an exciting, and then they want to create experiences for the residents. And of course, once again, the family comes for the birthday party and there's a really cool custom menu just for them. These things cost almost nothing. They make the world of difference. And again, I think it's, you've heard death by 1,000 cuts. I'd say this is success by 1,000 small acts.
So I like this so much. The idea that, what you're really talking about is creating great experiences for everybody who walks in the building, whether it's residents, team members, family members, even if the public comes in. And so I'm watching this. I'm an operator, and this is my last question for you, but I'm the operator. I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, I already got this building. And you sort of touched on this already, but I'd sort of like to just see if we can hone in on it a little bit. I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, I wonder if there's anything I could do that wouldn't cost me a lot of money, but from a design interior setting could make it better. Where do I start? How do I walk through my building and look at that and think about that?
Yeah, if it's a facility that you've owned a long time, having a fresh set of eyes, like someone like us who would come in and see it completely through a different lens and maybe point out things that you've tolerated that you didn't even know were like, wow, that's really bad. We just did that for a project. The particular organization, and this in case a not-for-profit, their hit rate when they could get people to come in the door was super high, but they couldn't get people to come in the door because as you drive by, the place almost looked like an old hospital. It had zero appeal, and they couldn't figure out. I was like, well, let's look at this. So we're actually doing a partial reskin on a very low budget to just change the curb appeal, because they know once you get them in, their care team and the life experience and the residents that are there. So that's if you've owned it a while, fresh eyes. If it's a reposition, like where you're going to purchase something new and you want to reinvigorate it, one of the things that we love to know, we got like financial guardrails. What can you spend? What is the funding? Usually people, if they don't know what the number is, they'll be able to answer a question like, I'm confident we could spend this much. And then they probably know, but there's no way we can spend more than that much. And what we do is we ask for that up front. Some architects, what if money was no object? Well, that to me is a dumb question. Money is always an object. So why not just get real about money, treat money like gravity, and say, hey, we can spend, $1.5 million, not more than $2.5 million. Well, let's walk through and go, how could we spread that in a really useful way? Fix the things that need fixing most first, and then really light touch. But, because a lot of times there's paint and paper, if you will, that can change things. Paint, paper, and lighting can go a long way in certain areas. In some areas, it takes a heavier hand to do a deeper renovation. But if you can say, hey, I'm going to take 10% of the square footage and I'm going to really renovate that hard, and then I'm going to just unify the colors and the lighting so it feels uplifting and bright. The rest, I can stick closer to that $2.5 million and not be out at like a beautiful idea for $8 million. It has no value at all.
Terrific. Martin, thank you so much. This has been a great conversation. How do people find you?
Well, how do you people find me? So we are at www.kimmel. Wait, I'm so used to not saying it, so apologies. KimmelArch.com is our website, is a great place to find us. Well represented on LinkedIn and some of the other platforms, even though I'm not the super social media guy, but we have all that. But if you start typing in Kimmel Architecture, even into Google, you don't have to remember the rest of it. We will come up, and we love to help people. And that's what people in the senior business are doing. They're helping other people. And we love to work for organizations that are helping people out in the world.
Terrific. Martin, thank you very much. Thank you for watching. And we will be back on Friday with another great show on Foresight TV.